This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to specific individuals or events is purely coincidental. The night was alive in San Diego's Gaslamp quarter. Lights flashed, music pulsed from packed bars, and groups of partygoers crowded the streets. Marine Lance Corporal Tony Madison strolled down the bustling block with his fellow Marine and close friend, Corporal Mike Rodriguez, celebrating his 23rd birthday. Tony felt the buzz of the night. After months of deployment, it was good to finally relax. Despite the good vibes, his instincts as a Marine never dulled. He was keenly aware of every movement around him, a habit ingrained through years of training. As the two Marines reached a lively corner, a group of college fraternity members, clearly well into their night of partying, crossed their path. Their voices were loud and boisterous, occasionally sending slurred challenges to strangers in the crowd. Tony and Mike made eye contact and shrugged, hoping to walk by without incident. But it wasn't meant to be. One of the fraternity members, a tall, muscular guy with a backward baseball cap, locked eyes with Tony and sneered. "Why are you eyeballing me, pretty boy?" he called out, slurring slightly. Tony tensed, his pulse quickening as he kept his gaze forward. "Let's keep walking, Mike," he muttered. But another fraternity brother blocked their path. "Oh, come on," he taunted, smirking. "He's talking to you, dickhead. Show some respect." "I'm not looking for trouble," Tony replied firmly, his eyes fixed ahead, ignoring the circle that was forming around him and Mike. "Look at this guy, thinks he's a tough guy," another frat member jeered, stepping in close. "Come on, show us what you got." Tony knew they were outnumbered. There were at least 6 of them, all young, cocky, and apparently looking for trouble. "Let's walk away," he said, still calm but ready. Mike, standing behind Tony, kept his head low. "Let's just go," he muttered, scanning for a way out. But the frat boys were intent on pressing the issue. The first one shoved Tony in the chest. "What's wrong? Can't handle a little fun?" Tony took a deep breath. He'd trained in MMA and held a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. He could handle himself. But this wasn't a fair fight, and he had no interest in breaking the peace. "Back off, man. No one wants trouble here." But another shove came, then another. In seconds, fists were flying. The first one came at him, swinging wildly. Tony sidestepped, grabbed the arm, and twisted, using the guy's own momentum to send him crashing into his friends. Another one lunged at him, and Tony blocked, deflecting the punch and delivering a quick elbow strike to the side of his jaw, sending him staggering backward. Mike found himself grappling with 2 other guys, struggling to keep them at bay. The chaos around them was intense, with drinks spilling, people screaming, and bodies moving frantically. One of the frat boys came at Tony with a solid punch aimed at his face. Tony ducked, pivoted, and swept the guy's leg, bringing him down hard onto the concrete. But before he could catch his breath, another guy landed a punch on Tony's back. He stumbled forward but quickly regained his footing. A kick hit him in the thigh, and he gritted his teeth, countering with a swift knee to his attacker's midsection. The guy doubled over, coughing. 2 more advanced on him, fists clenched. Tony dodged the first punch, barely avoiding a second one aimed at his head. He locked eyes with his next opponent, feinted to the right, and then pivoted, launching a solid punch that connected with the frat boy's cheekbone. The impact was brutal, and Tony knew it immediately. He'd shattered the guy's orbital socket. The guy fell to the ground, holding his face in agony. The police sirens blared, cutting through the noise and bringing the chaos to an abrupt halt. Tony's arms ached, his jaw was bruised, and his knuckles were raw. As he looked around, he realized just how out of control things had become. Cops stormed the scene, handcuffing Tony and Mike while tending to the injured frat members. Tony was taken to the local police station, and his world soon spiraled into a legal nightmare. The Marine Corps didn't take well to Marines getting into bar fights, especially when the other party ended up in the hospital. Within days, he was formally charged under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, with aggravated assault, disorderly conduct, and various other infractions. His command was not sympathetic, and a guilty plea seemed to be the only way out. They offered him a deal, 18 months in prison and a bad conduct discharge if he pled guilty. He felt his stomach twist as his first sergeant handed him the paperwork. "You might want to talk to a civilian lawyer," his first sergeant suggested, his voice low. Tony took the advice. After a few phone calls, he hired a civilian attorney, a former JAG, and a seasoned defense lawyer. Tony felt a surge of hope as his lawyer said, "Listen, just because you won that fight doesn't mean you're guilty of assault. The issue here is self-defense. Legally, what matters isn't just what happened, it's your perspective at that moment. Did you feel threatened? Were you trying to protect yourself? Did you act reasonably to defend yourself against grievous bodily harm?" Tony nodded, hope flickering in his chest. "Absolutely. We were outnumbered, and they kept pushing us." His lawyer then said firmly, "Then let's take this to trial. We'll prove to the court that you acted in self-defense." Tony agreed, his mind set. He was not about to let his career and his honor be tarnished for standing up for himself. The trial was set at Camp Pendleton, California, and as the day approached, the defense team prepared meticulously. They compiled a list of demonstrative exhibits, including diagrams of the scene, sketches illustrating how the frat boys had surrounded Tony and Mike, and statements from witnesses who had seen the events unfold. They practiced his cross-examination of each of the frat boys, ready to expose their inconsistencies and aggression. On the day of the trial, the defense team's confidence was palpable. The military courtroom was filled with spectators, mostly Marines, their faces impassive but their eyes keen. Tony sat beside his lawyer, his uniform pressed, his gaze focused straight ahead. The prosecution called the frat boys to the stand one by one, each painting a picture of a violent Marine who had snapped and attacked them. They described Tony as the aggressor, claiming they had only been joking around when he became hostile. When the civilian counsel rose for cross-examination, his expression was cool, his voice sharp and direct. "You said you were joking," he addressed one of the frat boys, his voice calm yet piercing. "So explain to me why you shoved him repeatedly. Is that part of your typical joke? What's funny about that?" The frat boy stammered, clearly thrown off by the questioning. "Well, we didn't mean anything by it." The defense pressed on, showing the jury a diagram of the bar. "Isn't it true that you and your friend surrounded Tony and his friend, cutting off their escape?" The frat boy squirmed in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. "I guess, maybe, but we weren't going to hurt them." "Not going to hurt them?" the defense lawyer echoed, his tone incredulous. He paused for effect, letting the silence fill the room. "Then why did 6 of you advance on 2 men who were minding their own business?" Piece by piece, the defense lawyer dismantled their story. He pulled out surveillance footage from a nearby bar which captured glimpses of the frat boys' aggressive behavior leading up to the fight. The defense lawyer slowed down the footage, highlighting how the group had circled Tony and Mike, blocking their path and shoving them repeatedly. Finally, civilian defense counsel turned to the jury, giving a closing argument that would resonate in their minds. Lance Corporal Tony Madison did not seek out a fight. He was there to celebrate his birthday, nothing more. He didn't ask to be harassed, pushed, surrounded, and taunted by 6 men. But when it became clear he was in danger, he acted to protect himself and his friend. Self-defense isn't about who won the fight. It's about survival, about reacting when you feel threatened. Tony Madison was alone, outnumbered, and he did what any reasonable person would do. He defended himself. He paused, locking eyes with each jury member in turn. "If self-defense doesn't apply here, then we are punishing a man for simply trying to stay alive." The room was silent as the jury considered his words. When they returned, the verdict was clear: not guilty. After the trial, Tony walked out of the courtroom feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The defense lawyer clapped him on the back. "Remember this, Tony," he said with a grin. "Sometimes staying out of bars and Gaslamp is the smartest thing you can do." Tony chuckled, relief and gratitude in his eyes. The lesson was a hard one, but it was one he would never forget.